Welcome to Life on Life's Terms, episode 57. It's your host, Justin. We have Aaron Seibel in today. We're going to get into the topics of acceptance, converts' feelings about the Catholic Church in regards to all of these sexual scandals that have been coming out, as well as discernment and why are there less young Catholics in the church today. But before we get into any of those topics, I need to pay my bills. So quick shout outs to Liam Connolly at Connolly Law for all of your Canadian law, will, estate, and media issues. Please Google Liam Connolly at Connolly Law. For all of your counseling needs, such as addiction, family counseling, please Google adaras.ca. That's ADARS.ca. The famous Chris Sucha will be able to accommodate you through Skype or FaceTime for your mental health needs, regardless of where you may be geographically. Please Google adaras.ca. So, Aaron, now that my bills are paid, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah. I know you listened to the episode with me and the bishop last time, talking about abuse of power and some of the sexual abuse that was that's in the Catholic Church. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's not. It is. So the only reason why I'm saying this is for any of the listeners, if you haven't heard that episode in particular, I would strongly encourage you to go do so, because we're going to probably be referencing that episode quite significantly throughout this episode, right? So I'd almost consider this a part 2 of that, right?
Yep.
How's your coffee this morning?
It's caffeinated and it's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank God for Brazulla Cafe. Brazulla Cafe gave us this coffee today, and it's a great coffee. They're a good sponsor. Go check them out. Anytime you need coffee, especially in a French press, check out Brazulla Cafe. So now that the bills are all really paid.
Are they?
Now they are. So let's go into acceptance. So that first piece that I was talking about, acceptance, basically what I think you and I had talked about pre-show was how we as the people, Catholic or not, can accept the church's apology. I mean, at this point, I don't think it's debatable whether they've done what they've done. They've done what they've done. You know, how deep it goes, I don't really think that that's necessary for a conversation.
No.
You know? And the reason why I say, like, does it go to the cardinals? Does it go to the bishop? Does it even go to the pope? I mean, regardless at this point, does it matter?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I think the biggest thing that really matters is the Catholic Church needs to internally set those who are, if you will, obligated to these issues, like these people who engaged in these scandals. The church needs to lay down their own hammer, so to say, I think, right? They need to show that their institution can be just as any nation. I mean, the Vatican is its own nation,
yeah.
Right? And so I think that's one of the pieces that we as public, Catholic or not Catholic, are really looking for. That has to happen.
Well, yeah, I think it's like an issue of trust. Like, so you're making all these rules and stipulations, you know, like, I guess for me, an apology is more on a person-to-person basis. And when you look at the church, it's just this big corporation institution that
Sure.
under normal circumstances just would collapse under its own frailty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people just get upset and say, you know, let's go on to the next thing here. But this thing just kind of sticks around no matter what. It's like a...
Well, and I think you and I had also talked about the external and the internal feelings about this. And as much as it's external, this apology kind of has to be personal from the church.
Yeah.
Because it is, I think, for the most part, hurting a lot of Catholics internally.
Yeah.
And I think for people who aren't Catholic, it's kind of like that accusing finger going, see, you guys aren't that holy.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's one of
Holy
those
Catholic Church. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's one of those things, right? So I think, like I was saying, I don't really think that there's a reason to go after, like, how high does it go in the hierarchy? I mean, let's talk. I mean, one can say, okay, well, the bishops move these people around. You and I have talked at length about how a lot of religious are sovereign states themselves.
Yeah.
Right? There is a legalese in there about being a bishop and what that actually means, and the difference between a religious priest and a diocesan priest.
I think the big issue with that, though, is it's very fuzzy. Like, we may have an understanding of what that is.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of people who have no idea what that really actually means. And sometimes I wonder if people who are in the inside of the inside, they themselves aren't really are sure of what all that means. I'm not, because it's all a bunch of fuzzy legalese, and so it can look like a cop-out, or, you know, like it's...
It can. I mean, they're very archaic laws.
Sure, whatever
right?
it is, but the fact is that general public has no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So I think
we're talking inside baseball of inside baseball. Like, we're talking about, does the A go before the I? And you're like, what's the A and the I doing? What are you guys talking about? Like, I think that's kind of what, if we're kind of getting to that legalese type of thing, I think just that issue of we want to have that confidence restored, like that teaching authority. Like, we're part of an organization. Mm-hmm. It's not just a me and Jesus type of religion. It's me and an institution and Jesus and God and, you know, everybody else, and the whole supernatural and preternatural, and trying to come to that full understanding. And so when you see these things and they affect you internally, it's like, well, in a normal situation, in a normal organization, it's the time to disassociate yourself. Like, this is not healthy for me.
Especially with the gravity of the sex scandal and how long it's gone on.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
You know?
And it's just like you're looking for that out, but I recognize as a Catholic that out isn't so easy. Like, there's bad consequences for that out too. So you're like, oh, okay. So you're kind of left, you know, you're like stuck in a bad marriage where you can't get out type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it feels like. And you're just like, this sucks. Like,
well, I thank you for your honesty and your feeling. You know, that's where it's, because I mean, even for my own feeling, like, I have to be honest when I say I'm less likely to go to church today.
Yeah.
You know, I'm more open towards, but I've always been open towards other philosophies.
Yeah.
You know, like, I've always been open towards Buddhism, the Tao, just to see what that's about. Read about it. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to practice it. I mean, it's just about reading it or learning about it or trying to figure out, is it offensive to the God of my understanding, right? That's where I took the personal claim to my understanding of a higher power. I learned that prior to coming to a religious organization. Sure, I was baptized Catholic before I could even say yes or no, being French and all. But I think it's one of those things too, like, I'm kind of glad that I was baptized Catholic also. But at this point, especially being a sexual survivor, it's difficult for me to say, and recovered addict, knowing what amends is about.
Yeah.
You know, and to look at an institution saying, you guys are the ones who gave me the groundwork and what an apology is, and the hypocrisy that you're falling in because you have decided not to do what you have prescribed for all of us to find absolution. Why won't you be the example for us?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that for me personally is hard to swallow, you know, and I think a lot of Catholics who are or cradled Catholics, that's a hard pill to swallow because we try to live this way.
Yeah.
You know, when I was in discernment, one of the priests said this to me. He says, you know, it's easy to work with somebody who knows that they're wrong. Mm-hmm. Right. The hardest one to work with is the one who has been living a Catholic life their entire life and can't understand why they're wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that solace is true. Mm-hmm. Right. Because, or that ideology from that priest is true because, like I said, we are the ones, some of us who are cradled Catholics, looking at this whole entire issue going, well, why the hell can't you make absolution and penance like we have all done and found clarity of freedom once we understood what our wrongs were?
Yeah.
Right? And I think on that side of the fence, it's very difficult to look at the church in any other way but that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I know you coming from as a convert, right?
Yeah.
I'll just let you get into that a little bit because I know your feelings around that are pretty. I mean, it's a nice segue from what we were talking about just 2 seconds ago. So I think if you want to just kind of set that up, how your feelings are now, and just a little bit about what you walked away from in order to come into this church.
So I was a practicing Presbyterian before I became Catholic. I was in a difficult marriage in that. And but we were looking for spiritual unity, I think, from both of us. There was a genuine offer there. But I recognize where I came from, and especially where my ex came from, was more of an anti-Catholic background. And so the challenge was finding a church that we both agreed on. But, I like my background. Like, it was comfort, it was home, it was my culture, it was my, my waspy...
Mm-hmm. What's a WASP?
A white Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Yeah.
So you feel like you're privileged and, part of the elite and, noblesse oblige, where you're just there to help people type of thing because you can help people. You're not the suffering poor type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I like my background and, I was said, we need to find a church that we both agree on, but I hate the church that you go to. So, I start learning about other churches. What church can we both agree on that, satisfies both of us? And none really did. Maybe the Anglicans was more liturgical, but kind of like the Presbyterians. I just couldn't handle any of those evangelical fundamentalist types. I just thought they were just too off the wall for me. They're just too rabid, too zealous. I'm pretty a low-key type of guy.
Yeah.
And so, but I was having issues with Protestant, so you eventually get involved down into theology. So you're trying to understand your own theological background, and you start reading theology of other backgrounds, and none of them really makes sense. And then there's this whole thing called the Catholic Church. And, I've studied other religions, other systems of spirituality, trying to, broaden my horizons type of thing. And, basically fortify my understanding of what my spirituality and divine revelation and truth really is. So I look at this Catholic thing, I've been able to read every other church, not like I'm going to get influenced by this thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, the way it goes and describes is like, oh my goodness, this thing is true. Like, true. Like, This is like, if you're looking at a picture and you see a two-dimensional picture, it's like all of a sudden you're seeing the picture in 3D all of a sudden. It's like, now it makes really sense. Or you're seeing something in black and white.
Yeah.
And it looks color and there's, this is like, wow. Like, and I'm describing my interior spiritual understanding of things and like, that's why things are the way they are. And, that makes sense. And so you're just, but it's scary. Like,
so it was all kind of fitting for you in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, so I thought, wow, because it just kind of, is there anything this thing can't teach me? Because I felt like such a dry sponge just looking for something. Like, I was just so desiccated where I needed something. I was happy where I was, I thought. I had a good job, family, I was estranged from my own family. That was kind of that sore spot that I always wanted mollified. I wish that could get changed. I wish, this could be changed, that could be changed. Yeah. But just reading that, I was like, oh my goodness, like, is there anything this thing can teach me? So I guess I get hooked in, hook, line, and sinker, like, well, if that's true, then I got to accept the whole thing type of thing. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I almost became a challenge. I want to see if there's a thing here that I can totally disagree with and I can fully walk away and then I'll just consider it a done deal. Well, I couldn't do that. And I just kept reading and reading and reading and reading. And next thing you know, I'm down a rabbit's hole of theology and spirituality and well, eventually I got to share this, and that didn't go so well. We tried to make a go of it for about a year, trying to, incorporate us into our family, but it wasn't going to go. She couldn't accept it. It was too beyond her. It was, it's too strict, too restrictive, too whatever you want to call it. And, she had to do what her conscience called her and separate, and, that was that. So I said, well, on the one hand, I don't really want to get divorced or, lose my family. It's for the good of the children, right?
Yeah.
But you see that line, he who loves his wife and children and father and mother more than me cannot be my disciple. So I was like, oh, okay, well, you got her, Lord. Well, I trust you enough that I'm willing to wreck my life for this thing, thinking I'm going to get more by losing this to have this.
Yeah.
So thinking I'm going to be even more fulfilled. I'm going to be more, I'm just going to be more elated in life generally. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, wow, this is, I'm not so dry anymore. I've got a little more spirit in me. I just got a better understanding. I feel like I got more spiritual power. Like, you could say a little prayer. Next thing you know, a mountain really does crumble. It's not just a nominal something you see in the Bible. It's, you spiritualize everything, meaning it becomes something real. So I'm feeling I'm joining something that's going to be really powerful, that I'm going to really be a part of history, that I'm going to be somebody great, that I'm going to be somebody, whatever their stupid, whatever motivations they were at that time. That I think that's what drove me on. And I thought everything else would come out in the wash. And eventually, things will work out for the good for those who love him, type of thing. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe I was a little bit cavalier about how I did it. But when you're at that time, there's a lot you're going on faith. Like, you can't see the future. You don't know what's going to happen.
So essentially at this point, your family left. So you're without children, without wife.
Yeah. Without home at that time.
And you're going through what we call the RCIA program.
Yeah.
And I forget, what does RCIA stand for again?
Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults.
Yeah. So you have to go through a series of teachings and lessons in order to get a baptism within the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. However, most people don't, and I can say this from discernment, if you were baptized in another church, that suffice enough to come into the Catholic Church. You don't necessarily have to take RCIA, depending on the church.
Yeah.
So again, therein lies two Catholic churches still don't agree.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They are
depending on your parish, depending on your bishop, depending on your whatever.
It depends on certain things. So like your church called for it. I know churches in our geographical area that don't call for it.
Yeah.
They don't call for an RCIA program, and the priest will still baptize you.
Yeah.
So as you're going through this, you're seeing the benefits even regardless of your family leaving, or was it just disparity really?
Well, I did it because that's what I figured. Like, when I got the actual sacraments, that's when it was going to really take off. Like, it all makes sense then.
So let's break that down for people who aren't Catholic. Sacraments is meaning you first have to get your baptism, and then you get your
confirmation.
And then after confirmation, it's...
Well, if for me, I was already baptized.
Yeah.
So I always had that infant baptism. So I had to go for a first confession.
That's right.
And then I got my confirmation.
Yeah.
And then I got my first communion.
Yeah. And communion is?
Like the Eucharist?
Yeah.
Well,
so
the host or whatever.
For people who aren't Catholic, the Eucharist the Eucharist is basically a sacrament that we accept at the end of every Mass that we as Catholics perceive to be the flesh of Christ. And then we also drink his wine, which once the sacrament is created becomes his blood. That's the significance of that. We actually eat Christ, so to say, as the Last Supper at every Mass on Sunday. So I know for people who are not Catholic, it's probably hard to wrap your head around, like, what the hell? But that's basically...
Well, they get that nominalism where it's just they spiritualize it, and because it doesn't really make sense to them.
Well, and again, you and I had a discussion too, where a lot of things that the Catholic Church does, and they've said this, is because that's the best way for people to learn is through this action, an actual action.
Like spirit rituals.
Yeah. So like these rituals, by being played out almost theatrically, if somebody can't read, they can still kind of understand it by seeing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's just a representation of the sacrifice of Christ on the cross to the Father, and atonement for our sins, and then everybody's good to go.
And then again, when we go into the word of atonement, that opens up a whole new part of the waters of the ocean.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go there. I think you showing the sacrifice that you went through to get into the Catholic Church. Let's fast forward to the piece about being around priests and your children and the kind of the things that we kind of look at. Like I've always had, so being through discernment, I've always had, like, recently more of a personal relationship with the religious. There's some that it's like and I'm also an ex-convict, so I know who's a criminal and who's not. It's kind of like it's a radar that you develop, just like a police officer does. Like, you just know. And some priests, that goes off.
Yeah.
Some priests it doesn't. But like you were saying, because of the scandal, you're like, are my children going to be safe?
Well, that was before, like, this second round. Like, I've always had this more, this bigotry, shall we say, as a Protestant, that priests are pedophiles because they're celibate.
Oh, okay.
Like celibacy, because they're celibate, because they have no way to channel that sexual energy, it ends up becoming distorted and they become pedophiles.
So let's look at that, because in the last episode, Bishop Sylvain and I had talked about that.
Yeah.
And he even said that there's a prejudice about people who are celibate.
Yeah.
And he also said that, there's a lot of saints and stuff that were celibate their entire life.
Yeah.
And he also said that the solution towards celibacy essentially is just not to be alone.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, I can tell you through discernment, I didn't want to be a diocesan priest.
Yeah.
Because I find that a much lonelier life than living in a religious order such as the Oblates or the Franciscans or even the Jesuits.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. They live in community all of the time. And
yeah.
I thought to myself, well, that's something that I would rather have in my spiritual life than not.
Yeah.
Right? With that filter and the bishop saying something, or the emeritus bishop saying that, how does that reflect into your preconceived ideas about celibacy?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, because I think I had more of a kind of a delineated, there's the spirit type of thing. I wasn't even sure really where the spirit, but that we got natural hungers.
Yeah.
And it's like when you starve enough, you eventually get hungry, you'll eat a whale type of thing because you're just so hungry.
Yeah.
If you deny yourself drink enough times, you'll get thirsty, you'll drink anything, and you'll go off the wagon. And the same thing, you repress your sexuality long enough, eventually it'll burst and the dam will. And that was kind of, that's how I assumed the world worked back then. I'm not saying it was right. That's just my, and so, Presbyterian layman.
And so what is today? Can you see that point of view from?
It's been more refined.
Yeah.
Just because I've experienced spiritual conversion. Like if we go into the Bible and Ezekiel talks about, I'll give you a new heart and a new spirit. Yeah. I could say, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, that's objectively true. Like it's not just spiritualizing something, a reality, not spiritualizing, meaning it's a bunch of words that really don't mean anything in the real life, in our real physical, as we experience life. I've experienced that interiorly, of a new spirit, of a new heart. So I accept that. So my issue of like sexuality has been refined, but my old biases, they come into play. I'm not going to deny it's still there. Do you agree with what the bishop was saying, that the Catholic Church is going to have to become the front runner of sexuality? And they're going to have to go into sexual. I can tell you this, being in discernment. So when they asked me about my sexuality, this is as far as it went. All they said to me was, do you know what sexual orientation you are? Yeah. And that was it. Yeah. Nothing more. I said, yeah, I know. Yeah. And there was nothing more asked or said. And then when you go and see the psychologist, they ask you about any abuse as a child, so on and so forth. Like that's pretty evasive. Yeah. But of course it's with a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. Sorry, it's a psychiatrist, I believe. And so, anyways, they started talking to you about all this stuff, and then they comprise like what basically needs to happen within your novitiation into a religious order, and like is he going to psychologically be able to handle being a priest? Yeah. Right. It's quite intense. It's not just like, hey, I want to start a church. It doesn't happen like that in the Catholic faith, right? Yeah. Or the Catholic Church as an institution. So I think by looking at those kinds of things, I mean, you were even saying like through your annulment process that you were asked some pretty intimate questions. Right. Because you had disclosed to us that you had gone through a divorce. So obviously you're going through an annulment process right now in order to be back into the Catholic Ocean of women, I guess. I suppose, yeah, maybe. If not, I'll take outsiders too. So I think it's one of those things too where those evasive questions that they're asking, they're actually trying to learn.
is what it seems like to me, because they're actually trying to learn the human behavioralism behind it.
Yeah.
Right? And as evasive as it is, and I hope that it's helping them to understand things, because the Catholic Church wasn't always celibate, and the Catholic Church wasn't always that priests couldn't get married.
Yeah.
There, at one time, priests could be married and priests could have wives.
Yeah.
I can tell you on the discernment side, I was in a relationship discerning for the priesthood, and I was going to become a deacon as opposed to a priest.
Yeah.
And one of the things so this would have allowed me to be married.
Yeah.
Now, I can tell you that the spiritual intimacy and the emotional intimacy that I had with some of the people that I was working with, the woman that I was with was very jealous about this.
Right.
It makes it almost impossible to keep that relationship pure, or have your significant other or your partner feel worthy when you have all of these intimate relationships in a spiritual and emotional way, and the physicality of your own personal relationship with your partner just is not even really there.
Right.
So that was the one thing that I had recognized, and I recognized if somebody's actually going to run a church, you don't have time for a wife, because your parishioners take that much from you. And as a priest, you marry the church.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't think, we have nuns to work in a church with the priest. So to employ all of a sudden your wife to be your secretary or something doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't really work. I wish that we could somehow figure out how a priest could get married and keep that title. I just don't think it'll ever happen in our church, because we've been set with celibacy for so long and without marriage that I don't think it'll ever.
Well, it'd be such a huge cultural shift in the whole church.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, it's like you go into the Eastern Rite where they do have married priests, and it's just so different than if you've...
The Eastern Rite doesn't anymore. They're deacons, actually.
Okay.
They did. You're right, though. Just recently they did.
Yeah.
But it is a new change within. So the Eastern Rite, let's just break that down. That's like the Ukrainian Catholics. Ukrainian Catholics and who else?
It would be Greek Catholics, Malachite, and just I think there's 22 different Eastern rites or whatever that are attached to them. But the majority of Catholics are Roman Rite Catholics.
Yeah.
And so it's, I guess if you've grown up Catholic your whole life, there's an understanding of what the institution is. I come from a Protestant background where we had married priests. Like it was abnormal to see an unmarried minister. It'd be weird. It'd be like, is this guy gay? Like, he'd be untrustworthy. Because I don't know, it's a different culture, it's a different understanding. I find in Protestant churches they're not as institutional. They're not forever. They're here for a time and they're gone tomorrow type of thing. It's not the church that Christ established and will never die until the consummation of the world.
So let me ask you, Aaron, when it comes to your conversion, how do you feel today about giving up what you gave up basically and coming into the church, even like with this sex scandal? Like, how are you dealing?
I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of soul searching, and there's a lot of misgivings, I guess. Mm-hmm. You just, do I even trust this thing anymore? If it's wrong here, where else is it wrong? That type of internal questions. Maybe depressed at certain spots. Like I'm not as... wow, I'm full of the Holy Spirit type of look at me type of go. It's kind of like what have you done?
I almost in a regard think of it as a stain not just on the church but on all the parishioners.
Yeah, well, it's hard.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Regardless of what other people think of me, I really don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Never really have.
Yeah.
But it's one of these things where it's a stain I almost can't even remove.
Yeah.
And being a sexual survivor, from that place, it's even a harder digestion to make, especially when I see that the church hasn't really done iota one to rectify that apology.
Yeah.
That's
giving that confidence to sit and move on
and be able to say as a parishioner or a Catholic believer, or within the institution that, well, you know what, at least the church did this. Right? So, it's one of these things, like we talked about acceptance right? Like that was one of the topics that we had picked to talk about. I'm having a difficult time accepting what I would be able to accept if the church were to find its balls and go and do what we have done for a long time. And that's, you've even done it. Sure, maybe when I was standing, and I wrote this in the blog that came out with the bishop, is that, you know what, I went and took and mustered as much courage as it took in order to stand in front of a judge and be handed out a great and an amazing sentence in order to pay back my debt to society within the community.
Yeah.
But you know what? At any time, that judge could have said, you know what? No, you're doing 14 years. Fuck you. You're in.
Yeah.
Right? But it still took the courage that it took and a leap in faith in order to go and do that. Right? Sure, my lawyer had it cornered, and he had the deal done the way that he had it done, but it doesn't matter if the judge says, fuck you, you're going in and doing 14 years. That's it, son.
Yeah.
You know,
what's that Russian roulette like?
Yeah, there's nothing you can do. And guess what? When I heard the bishop say the reason why the church hasn't given out an actual apology is because they're afraid of litigation.
Yeah.
Well, who the fuck gets a free pass? I didn't.
Well, I mean, maybe that's the privilege of.
But see, this is my personal conflict with the church.
Right.
Right? I got the courage. You have how many faithful praying for you?
Yeah.
And you're still reluctant to go out and act in faith and go and say, okay, if you want to hang me on the cross for things that this institution actually did, guess what? It's warranted.
Yeah.
It's warranted. Get the courage to go and do it. I mean, at least we, as the parishioners, can say, you know what? But the church went and did something right about it.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't hide.
Well, I think this kind of gets into issues of, like, in South America and the dirty wars. You think of, like, Oscar Romero, how it almost kind of, like, solidified with that government there that had the death squads and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But then he had that conversion in his spiritual life where he kind of recognized, no, this isn't right. And he started speaking out again. And he paid the ultimate price by speaking out against. He was assassinated during Mass.
Yeah.
You know, which is their holiest time as a Catholic.
Yeah.
And now he's venerated as a martyr, I think he's a canonized saint now. But he was, you know, martyred or canonized almost in spite of the church. Like, the church didn't really want him to have him martyred. It's like, it's just that everybody in El Salvador seemed to love him. And I think maybe that's kind of ultimately what we're looking for, to giving us that courage and that confidence, is having a bishop says, you know, mea culpa, I did it wrong. I'm not going to give you a theological, you know,
mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, that means absolutely nothing to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to, you know, face I did this wrong, and you know, I don't deserve to be a martyr. Don't do this hatred of the faith thing, and I'm just doing what needs to be done. And I think that would kind of inspire people, because right now we're like, okay, these are our leaders telling us what to do, not to do, how to do it, and you're like, oh yeah, but you yourselves can't do it. Okay, well, sure.
And let's face it, a priest at one time used to be one of these things where they were very high in stature.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's fast forward to today, because I don't want to get into how high they were in stature, because we can go into days about how they exploited French people and English people and just exploited. Yeah. It was an exploitation, really.
An abuse of power.
But today, what is a priest supposed to be? And I can tell you this through discernment, they're supposed to be the exemplification of the faith.
Yeah.
That's what they're supposed to be. And the bishop is supposed to be the exemplification for the priests.
Yeah.
That's how that's supposed. It's like a watered down effect. Right? Yeah. And the Pope is supposed to be the exemplification of the faith to the entire Holy See.
Yeah, to the whole world.
Yeah. So in regards to that, this is why my acceptance is not there. I do not accept what the church has done.
Right.
Because I see it at this point as they need to separate the humanness from the divineness of the church. They have to make an internal exorcism and exo all of those who were acting within malicious intent. They have to, because if they don't, that's again hypocritical in saying, okay, so I as a parishioner, if I had a demon in my body, I would have to go to exorcism if my confession didn't absolve me of these things.
Right.
Okay, well, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah.
Again, we need to recognize, and this is why I have a difficult time recognizing the rituals, because the rituals are also supposed to be an exemplification of the sacrament itself, the holiness of that prayer. And yet here we are, still they're unwilling to make an action towards something that they have all told us, like, I found absolution through the way that they told me to find penance. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Yeah. I have used what they have described, and maybe that's the blessing of the church. Probably is. But why the hell won't they go and eat their own words to find out what it is?
Right.
You see, this is the problem. So this is my problem with it. I cannot sit here and say that I accept what the church has done. And it's gone into a place for me where discernment is no longer because of it.
Right.
You know, this is my personal feeling. How can I mean, am I really going to believe that I'm going to be the guy who goes into the Catholic Church to change it?
Yeah.
Come on. What kind of save a hoe fucking aspect is that, right? Like,
who are you, Martin Luther?
Yeah, like get on my white knight of a horse and go and save 1 billion people.
Right.
What?
Yeah.
Like that's not my calling. You know what I mean? Like that's not what it is.
Yeah.
If there's anything that AA or any of these kind of secular self-help groups can do for the church is look to us and how we're continuously practicing your approach to the art of an apology.
Right.
And I think that's the line that they can go, we can accept that. Because as I had said in my blog a couple weeks ago now, as this episode goes out, you're not going to appease everybody by an apology. That's impossible. No. People just want to stay hurt.
Right.
And I also said, you know, there is no... The church can't give you, or anybody, any abuser can never, ever really give you the feeling of acceptance of what they've done wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay? Maybe they can, and God bless you if it happened. Yeah. Okay? I truly hope that happens. But the reality is the only person who can find conclusion is you if you take the first step.
That's right.
That's your responsibility. Granted, the church needs to go and make an apology, and then, as unfortunate as it is, it has to be public. Right. It has to be public. Yeah. And once they do that, then what can happen is we as the people can accept that. But at this point, like you had said earlier, it's a suppression.
Yeah.
We're all suppressing this idea in order for us to drudgingly go to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
That in my opinion, that is incorrect when we're going into church with that aura or feeling in us.
Well, and especially when you hear some theological understanding of God is love, and God just loves you like you wouldn't believe, and you know He's just so in love with you, and you're like, oh, that's nice. You know, you get these twee and sentimental ideas.
Yeah, here's this priest fucking a child in the mass,
and or like, well, why isn't the feeling reciprocated? It's like, well, maybe I'm just not receiving it. I don't know. Like,
yeah.
Like, you know, I'm just doing my obligations and, you know, satisfying, just trying to appease an angry God type of feeling.
Definitely. And I mean, I think, and like I said, it's one of these things where they need to find the courage.
Yeah.
They have to find the courage. I always tell this to anybody that I'm working with. I say, you know what? The first decision's always the hardest, and then after that, you're going down the waterfall anyways. Yeah. That's all easy.
Yeah.
It's just getting through the
first
current
jump
to get there.
Yeah.
Right? It's the first decision. And sometimes God makes the decision for you, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We've all been there where we knew we were supposed to. I even talked about the first act of righteousness that I ever did in my life where I didn't run away from trial.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I could have went to South America and said, screw this shit. Yeah. I'm not dealing with 14 years in prison. I'm going to die. I was literally going to die if I went to jail. Yeah. I don't mean that metaphorically. No. Physically, I was going to die. Yeah. The people that I was involved with at that time wanted nothing to do with me, and had I gone back into jail, I can assure you that some sort of rumor was going to be said, and Justin was going to be no longer.
Yeah.
Right?
Or he'd be there in the body bag coming out.
Well, did you know in Canadian prison, you actually have to pay for that body bag when you go in?
I haven't experienced that, but
they actually you owe them $48.92 when you go in, because that's how much a putty bag costs.
I wonder if an ass rape would count as at $42.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So anyways, what I was getting at is the act of righteousness that I had first really discovered was going to court. Right. And standing in that offender's box. I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm not guilty of possession for the purpose. I totally was. Yeah. And I was also guilty for the possession of the weapons that were in that place. Yeah. But on the second count of possession for the purpose, I was not guilty for that charge. That was an overcharge. I was guilty of possession of drugs that day. Yeah. Right? There's a difference there. If you are unequivocally nailed for child pedophilia, and for a long time in this church, we've had centers for priests who got caught in doing in the act of pedophilia. We take them out of the parish and sent them to like a treatment center, basically, and then put them back out in the community. The church is caught doing this in Boston. Yeah. This isn't like an off one. This is a reality.
Yeah, wasn't it in New Mexico or something like that there was a treatment center, or Colorado?
There's one in New Mexico, there was one in Colorado, and then there was one in Boston. Right. And there was a psychologist who was working with it who's no longer with the church. Yeah. And he's talked openly. If you go on Netflix, there's a movie about it. It eludes me to what it is right now, but they talk about the reformity of pedophilia priests. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I can say through my own process of discernment, I just want to see your feeling about this. When we used to do discernment for the priesthood, it was like 14, 15-year-old boys, okay, who are not worldly at all, aside from the church fucking sending. Well, they're sending them all over the world, right? That's how they become worldly, right? Today, you can't discern at that age into the priesthood. No. You have to be 25 years old or plus, right? Because they want people who've actually probably have sinned. Yeah. You know, they've lived life.
Well, I think it's also you got that manly courage there. It's because when you're an impressionable teenager, and let's face it, you're probably not the most masculine student in class. You know, you're a special breed, and you got some nefarious actors up above you, and they can impress on it to a 15-year-old, and that's usually, you're ripe for abuse. Like, you're in close quarters. Your mom and dad aren't there. You've been called by the church. You're out. Like, you're somebody else's guardian now, and it's like you're trapped, and it's like they have legal authority over you. Yeah. And I consider it a good thing that now you're 25 years old. You've been a man. You've had the time to make your own choices, and now you're accepting that call, and hopefully you're a little bit more stronger morally to say no to abuse, and
Well, and I think it's one of these things too, where Bishop Sylvain and I in that other episode talked about abuse of power. Right. This is a very extreme form of abuse of power.
Oh, for sure.
And unfortunately, in the history of the Catholic Church, like I said, exploitation has happened for centuries in this church, right?
Well, I mean, that's kind of one of those worldly temptations that as a churchman, like if you don't want to focus on God, well, we've got some honor, we've got some power, we've got some wealth, we got a little bit of boys here for you, or, pleasure. And sometimes those who don't want to go all in on the God thing, well, then you're left with the half choices left over. And if those things are available, you might utilize them because it's easier. And
one of the things that I'm not going to go in through all the diocesan priests under the bus in saying this, and I really hope nobody takes it this way, but I will say that I was told that when you become into the religious or into a religious order, you're not really making that choice for a career. But when you go to become a diocesan priest, most or a large portion of those priests are looking to become a bishop, or they're looking to become a cardinal. They're looking towards some sort of career within the Catholic Church. Yeah. They are looking to serve, and they want to serve, but some of them are more or less looking for
a promotion.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's also the gay vocation. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to go and say there's homosexuals obviously in the Catholic Church, and instead of acting upon those inclinations or those behaviors, they become priests, hoping that the graces of the church will stop those urges,
Right.
so to say. That's kind of the appeal of becoming a priest if you're gay,
Yeah.
right, or a homosexual. But the problem is it's more suppressed within the clergy. I mean, I'm going to tell you this too. I'll open this up a little bit for the curtain, so to say. It is a separate world when you're in the religious world as opposed to the parishioner world.
Oh yeah.
As much as the parishioners feel like they're close to the priests, it's nothing next to being a discerning male or a discerning person into
Basically
a religious
working with
order.
the priests,
Yeah. Like I've gone and done things with, and like sacramental things with priests, not, worked in the church, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a whole different ball of wax, But back to this whole, why are there less young Catholics? I think just to get to the tail piece of this, what's your view? Why do you think that there's no young Catholics in the church today, or pocketed young Catholics around around, I guess?
Well, I guess the allure of the church is, why are you becoming Catholic? And so if you listen to a lot of apologists, it's about having a fulfilling life, that you feel truly loved, you feel truly at peace, at serenity. And I think a lot of people, they don't experience that. They don't feel fulfilled. They don't feel loved. They feel lonely. They feel poor. They feel unloved. And they're like, well, if it's not here, I'm checking out. And a lot of the programs of the church is because of it's just a pray, pay, and obey mentality. It's just like, okay. And like the outside choices in the world are so more appealing. They're easier, number one. They're more accepting. They're more have more life to them. They're not ossified. They're not. Mm-hmm. And so it has that draw. Like, I want to be part of something exciting. I want to be part of something that's cool. I want to feel important. I want to advance somewhere. I'm not going to be part of an ancient institution that always seems to be on the out and out type of thing. So I think that's probably the draw to the young, like why it's not here. Like,
yeah. And I think that's one of the things too, is the archaic piece of the church.
Yeah.
It does definitely, I think, drive our tribalism with the Catholic Church and being so archaic.
Yeah.
Right? Where we're like, there's something primitive about that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why for males, why we're drawn to it. And then I think that's also another piece with millennials, why they're not drawn to it, is because it is so archaic. And it's like, what? You guys don't accept gay people?
Yeah.
Well, that's not really the truth. It's not that we don't accept them.
Yeah.
We accept
We
anybody.
just don't celebrate them.
Well, yeah. You know what I mean?
And so it looks suppressed, or, I say, it doesn't look exciting. It looks like I'm having to suppress who I am to be a part of your little show here.
Yeah.
And what am I getting out of this? A little hero cookie every week for being a good boy type of thing? And it's like, oh, okay, like that's, and so you can kind of get irreverent about it. You can, like, and if you don't have no friends there, like, the social thing isn't there. If it's,
well, and I think for you and I, like, you're not very old. I'm not very old. And when we go to church, there's not really a young
cadre there.
Yeah, no,
it's a kind of an old ladies club. Like,
yeah,
this is where church ladies hang out. And so that can kind of wear on you. Like, why am I even here? I've asked that question many times. Like, why am I here? Like, okay, Jesus is here really in the tabernacle. Well, that's great. But, there's a lot of those existential questions, like, why am I here, and why am I not out having fun type of thing?
Yeah.
Why am I sacrificing fun for this? Yeah. And then you'll get those diehards that say, oh, but this is really fun. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Like,
well, and you and I you're still a part of the Knights of Columbus.
Yeah.
I am not a part of the Knights of Columbus. I'm not going to go into why I'm not.
No, you don't need to.
But I think one of those things, that institution could have been great for young men to become a part of the Knights of Columbus, and that fraternalism is a great ideology, especially for most young men in our generation who didn't grow up with two parents.
For sure, yeah.
It would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
However, the issue is
ossification.
Yeah. They just, again, like, I remember in a meeting where I said I proposed to the elders in that group that we get a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and like, how much is that going to cost us?
Yeah.
Like, that's the generational gap.
Right.
I almost think that kind of stuff has to be scrapped and a new thing has to start.
For sure, yeah.
Because it's just not going, you're not going to change that gear. It's a dinosaur that's dying that just doesn't want to become something new.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
Or doesn't know how to be new.
And as much as the insurance piece is like, we have to be young and new.
Yeah.
The knights themselves are totally opposed to, at least in this geographical area.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Right? So I think that's also that's also a thorn in the side for young Catholics coming into the church.
Well, I mean, there's all these groups, sodalities, or prayer groups and stuff like that. And historically, there was lots. But in the present day, there's not much. You got these little old timer social type of things, but there's not that room where you can go and grease the wheels type of thing of socializing and be openly Catholic and not having to, and it's not just an identity. It's just like we can be genuinely Catholic to each other in this moment, and we can meet a bunch and they're on our wavelength. They're with us. They understand us. So we do the same things. It's hard to find that group that you can just really truly identify with and just be yourself. You're always having to compartmentalize, like, this room I'm Catholic for the prayers, but here I suppress my Catholicism or sublimate as best as I can, and I do this thing with these guys, and without trying to get yourself into trouble type of thing.
I did feel that at a time too. Like, I worked at a George Spady, a shelter here, and being Catholic was not something great.
No.
The people around there didn't really appreciate that. And that's fine. I mean, whatever, that's their own problem, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to hide my Catholicism.
But it's an issue of sublimating. Like, you just can't be overtly like, I'm genuinely Catholic to you, and I'm just here to, part of you just wants to share because it's so awesome at that time. Yeah. Like, you're on fire type of thing. But then there's the other part that you're just kind of ashamed of the whole thing. So
and again, I think that ashamedness, back to that sexual abuse stuff.
For sure. Yeah.
That's the tone of the stain, so to say, right?
Well, that's the shame of it, because it's like, and you started saying, well, what's this good news thing? What's this gospel? What's this, like, all these things that are supposed to be good about it? What is it? Like, it becomes very abstract on a lot of issues, where a lot of the issues that they seem to be fighting about and obsessed about, they just doesn't make sense to me after a while. Like, it's just like, I don't get it. Like,
well, and like I said, I think there's becoming, well, I can say this at this point, I'm a closet Catholic now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't go to church as much as I used to.
Yeah.
I have to almost, I'm on the walk right now, so to say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was difficult when I realized that discernment was no longer for me. I mourned like it was a death.
Well, it just ripped a piece of your heart out.
Oh, for sure. It hurt. Yeah. It hurt.
Well, it's like you think of all that sacrifice I gave up just to have that, and it wasn't it.
You know what I'll say, though? Over the 3 years that I was in discernment and I was celibate, I learned a lot about myself.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm more prepared now to be with somebody now than ever before in my life, because I really know who I am. Mm-hmm. And I know that I would not negotiate who I am with any partner.
Right.
Like,
you just got that extra confidence that you never had before.
Yeah. That's one thing that discernment gave me. I really know who I am. I've spent a lot of time by myself, with myself, and grew throughout that entire time.
Yeah.
Spiritually, emotionally, physically, you name it. You know what I mean? Like,
the whole person.
The whole piece really changed. Yeah. And so, and because of that, I think that's why I think I'm more capable of being in a relationship.
Right.
And I've heard this before too. People are like, well, how does a priest give you marital advice when they're not married?
Right.
Guess what? They're married to the parish.
Yeah.
They have almost 100 to 500 intimate encounters with every one of those those parishioners.
Yeah.
They understand what a marriage is about. Believe you me, when you take, or you're under the observation of obedience, chastity, poverty, and then whatever your mission is of the religious order that you're with as an extra, it's not an easy world to live in. Like, it's not easy when you're like, I can't, or it's not that you can't make money. You can make money as much as you want, but a portion of your earnings is going to go to your order.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's basically what poverty means. They're going to pay your rent. They're going to make sure you eat.
You'll keep living.
Yeah. Like, they'll keep all that going, but whatever you're making goes to the order.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's how that happens. The obedience piece is difficult.
Right.
Because, I mean, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say this, but I know somebody who had spoke to me privately and said there's a lot of stuff that they would love to be able to say publicly, but obedience does not allow them to do so.
Right.
Right?
So that's oppression.
And this is from the church doing this.
Right.
Right? Like, we can touch in on the piece about the Pope telling the American bishops that they couldn't, what was it, like... I'm
not sure if it was the Pope. It was just big news yesterday about their conference.
Maybe give a date. So that was like 11/12/2018.
It's from the 12th to the 14th of November 2018. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops are having a conference in Baltimore. And, of course, the sex scandal is centralized, as we understand it, in the United States. There's other scandals around the world, but
for sure.
Our big one is the Americans, because we're fed American media. So, anyways, they were going to vote on a resolution how to deal properly with sex abuse in their dioceses, and how can we, and I kind of think allude to that, maybe apology, but not, maybe it would be ham-handed, however it was going to be done. They were going to make a sincere effort and try to nail this thing in a coffin, because I think it's affecting them. Yeah. As much as, you might be upset, or I might be upset about the whole thing, or other people might be upset. I think there's a genuine, like, something's got to go here. Like, we can't go this same old that we've been doing. It's not working. Yeah. And
I think they're, if I can just interject too, I think they're seeing the numbers of the youth gone. I mean, let's face it, you and I live in a geographical area where we still have Catholic school boards. Yeah. Are these kids going into the church after they leave? No.
No.
Well, they're not even going to church on the weekends.
No, they go there for their school attendance mass. And, some might, I think there's some that might get involved in a parish here and there with family and stuff like that.
It becomes obligatory for them.
That legalistic understanding of it, and they're just not.
So anyways, continue with what you were saying about how the bishops, you think the bishops are feeling this?
Well, I think they want to turn a corner. I think they're... However, their weaknesses, or their fears and tribulations, and unmanly courage that they seem to exhibit, I think there's a genuine wanting to restitute what's been wronged. Yeah. But the morning conference, they got a letter from the Vatican saying a cease and desist order to not make any resolutions on this issue at this time. Go have a spiritual retreat, do something else, and it almost kind of implicated that the Vatican's got to make up their mind before the American bishops can, go along with it. So it seemed kind of like, suspicious, shall we say.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, there's a lot of mystique around it, and the Catholic Church has to, they got to open up. They've got to open up.
It is very dark, and rules and counter rules, and what's, because there's this code of canon law, which is like the criminal code, but kind of churchy. Yeah. And they, lawyers will fight over tooth and nail, and they'll have tribunals and arguing about, and you're like, and to the average layman, you're like, and they talk in weird words too. Like, it's not everyday layman words that you would understand. Like, oh, that makes sense. There's a lot of technical words, and there's lots of Latin in there. So you got to learn the second language. And
well, then I think if I can just shift a little bit, I think one of the things too that I got out of the episode with the bishop was what Truth and Reconciliation Commission really was. Yeah. I don't think people really understand what TRC is. Right. And what I was getting from what he was saying is that they're stuck. Yeah. They're stuck in this place where they're just listening to people, and there's no action coming out of it. Yeah. And so I think it's one of these things where action needs to be handed out while they're listening. Yeah. Right?
Like offering a solution to the person offering the damage that you've done to me type of thing. Like, can I do this for you? Yeah. And then just trying to find that happy medium, and then you get that collective action happening. Well, I heard from this person we should do this. I heard from this person we should do that. Maybe we should do this,
And they should, and we're shooting all over the church.
Yeah.
I get it. But I think that these are actual, I mean, you and I are the body of the church. We're not the bishops. We're not the religious. We're the people who would show up every Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, we're the ones who go out and work in the community and go back and give our donations.
Yeah.
And these shoulds are really things that we're saying, like, for the love of God, go and do this.
Yeah.
Go and do this because we're tired of being scandalized by your past sins.
Yeah.
That
Well,
just
it's like
keep
that
on
Catherine of
bubbling
Siena
up.
type of attitude to the Pope, like, get back to Rome and do your job type of thing.
Yeah.
Like, who are you? Well, I'm just a laywoman. I'm here to tell it to you. But, you know, you take it as a sign from God that, you know, sometimes, you know, we're shooting kind of thing, like we're just doing powerless, woe is me type of things. But I think sometimes with this type of discussion, something can strike in a bishop, and it's like, you know what? No, that is right. That's what we should do. That's what and maybe that could be that spark that changes something. You never know. Like,
well, and it's one of these things too, where you need to have you have to employ people. I don't mean like just by money. I mean, you need to accept people who have alcoholics who have done amends.
right.
I mean, because there's no difference between a personal amends and an institution making amends.
Yeah.
How are you going to do this? You have to rectify the society, you have to rectify the individual person, and you have to rectify those who are inside of the body of the institution.
For sure.
Those are the three things that have to happen.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? You need to recognize what your victimization is and what it has done.
Yeah.
You don't have to say in specificities, this priest raped this little boy. No, all you have to say is an institution, which would still hold anonymity for anybody who's done anything.
Yeah.
You as an institution can say this institution has engaged in these behaviors.
Well, I think it's almost like there's institutional amends and personal amends by the people who actually done the things.
Definitely.
And then, you know, that would go a real long with, number one, acknowledging that we as the church didn't do what we ought to have done.
But
maybe we didn't know maybe it was out of ignorance, but we're going to try to do this now. We hope that you accept it, and then we encourage the offenders to actually go and to offer their apologies, you know.
And so it's one of these things where if the institution can do it, it kind of gives clout.
Right.
And then the next piece is if it's going to be individual, the priests are actually doing this, then the next thing that has to happen is if they're actually going to go and make those amends, well then it has to be done in a way where if it's so decided that the abused decides to go forward and press charges against that particular person, by all means.
Church, yeah.
By all means. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Right?
Being a man and taking
Yeah. Now that's the courage piece.
Yeah.
Right? But the institution itself has to say, whether it was that bishop or not, it just has to say the history of this diocese has been implicated in these behaviors, and we take full acknowledgement that we have at some time done this.
But I think there's also sometimes when you implicate, it's like you just don't know that if you've done that, but you're assuming that you've done it. And
well, the reason why you use the word implication is because you can't necessarily say, but you can say we have participated in these kinds of behaviors. And behaviors can mean anything from, sexual deviance. That's
right.
A behavior, right? So if it's sexual deviance, well, that's the behavior. But at least there is still more exacting than not saying a damn thing right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Putting a paper bag over their heads and
then anybody from that diocese as a parishioner can say, you know what, my bishop actually stood up and did the right thing.
Yeah.
You know? And if anybody wants to accuse an abuser, it's not that. And I'm saying this even as like I said, and I'm not trying to grandstand saying that I'm continuously saying that I'm a survivor. I'm just saying I'm trying to make the point clear that even as a survivor, I still believe that there needs to be sufficient evidence that a priest has actually done what he's being accused of.
Right.
It's not one of these things where if somebody accuses, right away the priest is in the wrong, and there's no
#me too.
Yeah. Like I don't think it's one of those things.
Right.
You know, because that would just go crazy.
Well, that'd be unjust.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not fair to anybody, really,
right.
And then it just becomes a scandal, and then people are looking, they have their hands out and blah, 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 whatever.
Because I think ultimately what it is about restitution, and it is about atonement, it is about forgiveness, it is about conversion, it's about a reformation of a person's behavior.
And the other piece is, and I'm just going to throw this out here, and we'll end on this piece too. The Catholic Church may be the first institution to actually look at how to rehabilitate a sexual predator.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that's what that is.
That's for sure.
Right? And any other institution has not been able to do that. Our criminal justice system here in Canada still doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Okay?
We isolate those guys.
Yeah, we isolate them, and then when we put them out in the public, we make a letter about them, and then we put them on a GPS tracking thing, and like that's what we do. Yeah, and we tell the public there's so many of these guys that we can't isolate them from society, nor do I believe that they should be.
Right.
But the problem is there's no programs. I mean, I said this with the bishop. I thank God every day that my addiction is drugs and alcohol and not little children. Right. So, and I really believe that that's the perspective of what's happening. If in my ignorance, that's the way how I'm able to accept what that is, because at least that allows me a bit of empathy.
Yeah.
And God bless the person who has that issue.
Yeah.
I couldn't even imagine what that would be like to wake up and have those thoughts and know that they're wrong, and then the amount of denial it would take not to hang yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Keep on living.
Yeah, like that. I have empathy for that.
Oh, for sure.
To a degree.
Yeah.
Right? So in saying that, maybe the church is called to do something like that. Maybe this is the first institution that can say, you know what? We're going to go along the line of trying to rehabilitate these. I mean, we're taking them out of circulation, but we're going to go along the line of what is the psychological way to rehabilitate a sexual predator.
And offer real help out there.
And that's like that would be the line you would think would be the right way to go.
You'd think so, yeah. And hopefully it would cause a degree of a magnanimity that there is really real help out there. It's not just throwing stones at glass houses type of thing. We're not trying to destroy the place. We're trying to make it stronger and better and more, like it really is good news and not just news.
I'm not saying to chuck these sexual predators who just so happen to be priests out.
Right.
What I'm saying is let's get them the help that they need.
Right.
They can't be in circulation, evidently.
Yeah.
But they can get the help that's necessary.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So on that, we're gonna end this. I gotta pay. Well, no more bills paying, but I gotta do the plug for the Pride. So if you like this content, apparently there's a ton more of it. All you have to do is go to www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com, become a Pride member today. How you become a Pride member is you basically just give us your email and you will be privileged to sometimes bonus material and all of the blogs that are the afterthoughts after these episodes have aired. You can also engage in conversation with myself or the co-host Kenny in a real time. You just go to the Let's Chat app on that website and you will get us on the right now. Not later, but like right now. You got to wait about I'd say about 30, 40 seconds, though, just in the initialization, because it does take us a little bit to get to either our phones or our laptops, depending on where we're at. So please go to www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com and become a Pride member at your soonest convenience. I hope that this was an engaging conversation, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.